What would you do if you were perfectly calm at a stop sign, only for the car in front to suddenly slam into you in reverse, and then the driver tries to frame you for the whole thing? In today's story, a military veteran's quick thinking is a masterclass in how to turn the tables. This all went down back in the 1990s. I'd recently been medically retired from the military and was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life by attending college in Texas. My wife was working, and I was on my way to pick her up for lunch. To dodge the usual traffic, I took a route around the back of the campus. That's when I pulled up behind a brand new, candy apple red Chevy at a stop sign. It was one of their sporty little models, driven by a woman who, I couldn't help but notice, was also a rather striking model. There I sat, an old sailor in an old pickup truck, just listening to the radio and daydreaming about lunch. I watched as the red Chevy pulled into the intersection, and then, for no reason at all, it just stopped. I didn't think much of it. Maybe the driver was hesitant. I'd only just moved my hand to the gear shift, ready to pull forward, when the world went sideways. With a high-pitched squeal of tires, the Chevy shot backward directly at me. I instinctively slammed my truck into reverse, but it was a futile gesture. The little car smashed into my front end doing at least 25 or 30 miles per hour. For a second, I just sat there, stunned. Then, I cut the engine and got out to survey the damage. The front of my little pickup was practically totaled. The grille was shoved back into the radiator, which was now emptying its contents all over the pavement. Both headlights were shattered, and as I bent down, I saw the dark sheen of oil beginning to pool beneath the engine. The one bit of good news? I wouldn't have to worry about that squeaky fan belt anymore. With a sigh of pure confusion, I walked up to the passenger side of the little red Chevy. I was mad, sure, but mostly I was just trying to process what had just happened. Why would she stop mid-turn and floor it in reverse? I peered through the tinted window and saw the driver. Let's call her Tiffany, talking agitatedly on a cell phone. Seeing someone yapping on a phone didn't surprise me, but I probably should have wondered who she was calling. Instead, I just tapped on the glass. She turned a blank face to me for a second, and then she screamed into the phone. A shriek so loud it cut right through the window. "Oh my GAWD, he's got a tire iron." My head whipped around instinctively, looking for this crazed man she was screaming about. And then, the nickel dropped. I did a slow 360-degree turn. No houses, no businesses, no apartments. The sidewalks were empty, and the nearest traffic was blocks away in every direction. I looked back at the cars. Her little Chevy was sitting almost perfectly at the stop sign, right where it had been when I first pulled up behind it, and my truck was smashed into her rear. It looked for all the world like I had rear-ended her. The little witch had set me up. At that moment, Tiffany thought she had sealed my fate, painting me as a violent aggressor. She was completely unaware that this single, calculated lie was the very thing that would unravel her entire scheme and lead to her own downfall. My mind raced. A police car was on its way, summoned by Tiffany, and they'd be expecting to find a lunatic with a tire iron. I desperately needed to not be that guy. I rushed back to my truck, pulled the tire iron out from behind the seat, and hurled it as far as I could into a nearby field. Then I jumped back into the cab. It was a slim chance, but it was the only one I had. As one commenter on my story later put it so well, committing hard enough to break your own nose and feign unconsciousness long enough for smelling salts. That's dedication. You earned it. And they were right. I was about to commit. I made sure the gear shift was still firmly in reverse. I buckled my seatbelt, took a deep breath, and slammed my face hard into the steering wheel. Pain flared in my nose. I unbuckled, opened the door, and let myself slump halfway out of the truck, hanging there at an awkward angle. I heard sirens approaching fast. I went completely limp just as a police cruiser screeched to a halt beside me. An officer was yelling at me to get out of the truck, but I didn't move a muscle, trusting he wouldn't open fire on a limp body. He cautiously approached, saw the blood trickling from my nose, and lifted one of my eyelids. I made sure my eye was rolled way back. Satisfied, he let me slump back into position and went to check on Tiffany, who was putting on a near-hysterical performance about the lunatic who had just attacked her. Her act faltered the moment she saw me. I had banked on her being too consumed with her own story to notice my little bit of theater. Seeing my body hanging limply from my truck door made her stammer to a halt. A second set of sirens grew louder, and the officer told the now silent Tiffany to stay in her car. A few moments later, someone was cutting my seatbelt and carefully laying me on the ground. A medic checked my vitals, and then a harsh, demanding smell flooded my nose, smelling salts. I fought it for a few seconds, then put on a good show of a man groggily coming back from being knocked out. I tried to throw myself to the side, acting wild-eyed and confused. I sat up, looked at the mangled front of my truck, and moaned, "What the fuck did that idiot do to my truck?" The medic told me to lie back down, asking professional questions about what hurt. Every few seconds, I'd glance at the wreck and mutter angrily about the idiot who backed up like that. The police officer, having taken Tiffany's statement, came over and asked if I was up to talking. I said I felt fine, just sore, and the medic helped me to my feet. I handed the officer my license, insurance, and my retired military ID. Then, as if just noticing, I looked at my cut seatbelt and asked what happened to it. He explained they had to cut me out. I just shrugged. Just another item for his insurance company to pay for, I guess, I said. What the hell was his story, officer? Why did he back up that way? The policeman looked at me sharply. I described exactly what happened, but I was careful to keep referring to the driver of the Chevy as him. When I finished, he asked if I had any proof. Proof? I asked, frowning. What do you mean, proof? Then I let my jaw drop. Hey, wait a minute. You ain't telling me that idiot is saying that I did this, are you? He admitted that the other driver's story was that I had rear-ended her, not him, and then threatened her with a tire iron. I frowned again and told him I didn't even have a tire iron with me. It was sitting in my garage a couple of hours away. I stood aside as he searched the cab of my truck, and then came my lucky break. Without me having to point it out, he noticed my truck was still in reverse. This reveals Tiffany's greatest fatal flaw, her arrogance. In her haste to construct the perfect lie, she overlooked the simplest, most damning piece of physical evidence, a mistake that would ultimately seal her fate. The officer got out of my cab, a deep frown on his face. He told me to wait and walked back to the Chevy. He asked Tiffany to step out of her car. Once she was out, he leaned into the driver's side. After a few seconds, he stood up and asked her to repeat her statement. She launched into another marvelously teary performance but seemed puzzled when the officer remained completely stone-faced. He then asked her to describe everything she did after the accident. She backed down on the tire iron story, claiming it might have just been a reflection, but insisted I had beaten on her window and was faking my injuries. The officer glanced at the medic, who just slowly shook his head. My years in search and rescue taught me exactly what an unconscious person looks and acts like. The officer then asked her if she had tried to drive away after the crash. She swore her engine had died and that she'd never tried to leave the scene. The policeman nodded once, asked the medic to step over, and then asked him to sit in the Chevy and confirm what gear it was in. The last time I saw Tiffany, she was crying for real. She was also in handcuffs, being placed in the back of a patrol car, arrested for filing a false police report, fraud, and my personal favorite, assault and battery. The moment she realized the game was up, she started weeping and confessing everything, that she couldn't afford the car payments and her only option was to fake an accident to get the insurance money. At the station, I signed a statement that was a letter-perfect account of the events. I was careful not to mention how my nose got bloodied or how I ended up hanging out of my truck. The officers and the EMT's reports had already noted it appeared I was partially ejected on impact, so I didn't have to lie. I've always believed you should never sign your name to a false statement. In the end, her insurance was valid and paid for all the repairs on my pickup. The damage wasn't as bad as it looked. A little front-end work, a new radiator, and some cosmetic surgery. They even threw in a full overhaul. Her insurance also paid for a loaner car for a week. And the irony? It was a little red Chevy, just like hers. It was a nice car, but way too expensive for me. Having a car that nice might make a guy try something stupid to make the payments. As one person commented, the main takeaway for me from this story is that dash cams really do pay for themselves. And after what I went through, I couldn't agree more. The whole ordeal serves as a stark reminder that in a world where deception can hide in plain sight, quick thinking and an unbreakable will are your greatest assets. Sometimes, to ensure justice prevails, you have to be willing to meet deception with a bit of your own carefully crafted truth. What would you have done in my shoes? And do you think my response was justified, or a step too far? Let us know in the comments below.